Okay, good morning. It's 1 minute past 10, so let's kick off today's webinar. Welcome to what promises to be an absolutely fascinating session today. Much broader than most things. I mean, this webinar is called Tech, Tools and Talent. What more could you want? That's what our world is about how we make tech work better, what the tools you need, and how we get the talent to realize it. But I'm not speaking today's webinar. We're going to be hosted today by Guy Weberly from Forsite. Fascinating company, and every time I speak to Guy, I come away with more questions and answers because he's a really thought-provoking speaker. We've got a great panel with him. But we'll just kick off. Before we kick off, I'll just remind you that the panel are going to speak for a bit. You do have the Q&A function and the chat function. If you want to raise some questions, do send them in. If you want to chat, if you want to say something to the panel, equally use the chat function. So again, welcome. This is another in a UKAA series of webinars, hopefully illuminating the world of build to rent and the factors that make it great, and the factors will make it greater. And I'd say today's webinar should be really interesting. But that's enough me talking. I'm sure you'd much rather hear Guy and the panel talking. So Guy, I'll hand over to you if I may.
Thank you, Dave. And yeah, really appreciate you letting us host this webinar with the UKAA. So yeah, my name's Guy Adderley. I'm the UK country manager for a Kiwi-founded business called Forsite. We help organisations who own, develop, manage and occupy buildings to keep their staff, service providers, contractors safer on site. We do this with smart automation tools. We're very fortunate where we get to work across a really broad sector. And with that, we get to work with lots of different individuals, from property managers to construction individuals. And from that, we've amassed a lot of information. And this has kind of led to today's talk on tech, tools, and talent. This has been a huge shift of what we're doing. So the core bit is stemmed from over the last 5 years. The industry is really focused on turning offices into kind of these home-like experiences. So we're looking at the creature comforts, relaxed breakout areas. We've got on-site services and a big focus on technology to kind of connect lots of people, from the landlord to property managers to occupiers and lots of external services. But nobody could really foresee a global lockdown, and lots of people's homes were really not geared up to work remotely on a permanent basis. This has caused challenges for everybody, from our own home makeshift offices to unreliable internet connections, to juggling childcare, home life, and more importantly, retaining our own mental well-being. It's really clear that tech has played a vital role during this pandemic, proving kind of it's given us communication, we've got access to key information, medical developments, keeping us safe, and hopefully returning back to a little bit of life as we knew it. The pandemic has also reconfirmed the importance of human interaction, quality time spent with friends, family and colleagues, and is really shaping our view on what real estate space actually is and what purpose it serves. So joining us today on the panel is a really great mix of skills, backgrounds, experiences and opinions to take a deeper look into the technology, tools and talent we need in real estate today. So yeah, if the panel in no particular order could introduce themselves. If we could start with Nicky, that'll be great.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So I am Nicky Wightman. I am the Director of Global Occupier Trends at Savills. My role sits across the Savills residential and commercial businesses based in London, but reaching out to colleagues globally, really focused on the future of live, work, play, learn, and really much of my work focuses around this relationship between physical and digital. And so technology is a key part of my world, my life, my day-to-day. So I'm delighted to be part of today's panel. Thank you for inviting me along.
Thank you, Nicky. And Brent, good morning.
Morning, Guy, and hello, everybody. So my name's Brent Stojanovic, and I am a director at Navana Property Group. So for those of you that haven't heard of us, Navana Property Group, we are a relatively young property group, although growing quickly. And our sweet spot really is consultancy and the management of residentially led mixed-use schemes, which typically are regeneration based, but may not be. And also dedicated BTR places, spaces and schemes as well. And we offer a degree of consultancy from experience all the way through to design for management to operational cost modelling, the management and integrated operation of these places and spaces as well. Now, when it comes to what we think is important, tech, talent and tools, absolutely. Hence, I guess, why I'm here with this great panel today to discuss a few of those points. But we invest in our own proprietary tech agenda. We take customer experience and resident experience very seriously within our business, and we think that's a key battleground for anyone and everyone who wants to be successful in BTR, particularly going forward into the future. And we also think very carefully about how the place connects with the people that live, work and play there as well. So there's a degree of dedicated placemaking and place shaping specialism within the 4 purple walls of our business as well. So that's a little bit about us, and I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in. Thank you, Guy.
Cheers, Brent. Louisa. Good morning, Louisa.
Morning. Hi, everyone. I'm Louisa Dickins, co-founder of LMRE, which is a specialist prop tech recruitment firm. But we have a huge division called LMRE Living, which is headed up by Martha, who hopefully a lot of you know. We cover sort of build to rent, PRS, student accommodation, co-living and retirement living sectors. And the roles we sort of cover is anything from operations, leasing, investment, to the tech side, customer success. So fairly varied, but all things sort of build to rent. And nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Louisa. And finally, Michael.
Thanks very much, Guy. Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Crawford. I sit as the Head of Technology for Colliers International UK, specifically in the investment property team for the management of that, and predominantly working in the industry as a consultant as well to advise people via various channels, usually virtual at the moment, to help them understand technology, the vital role that that can play within their business, and help them embrace the change and not to be afraid of it. But coming back to the Colliers hat, as many of us wear these multiple hats these days, what we are aiming to do in the market is focus on disruption, change, and attracting and retaining the top talent and the top tenants and occupiers within our properties.
Perfect. Well, guys, thanks ever so much. And as Dave said, please do, if you have questions or you would like to raise your hands, please do. Hopefully we can get around to answering as many of your questions. But yeah, Michael, kind of interesting, you mentioned wearing kind of lots of hats. Over the years, we've seen kind of property management evolve, looking at the expectations of what those individuals need to do. So keen to get your thoughts, Michael, and your take, because there's been a huge emphasis on the return to work. Kind of it's what a lot of people are talking about. How can they get us out of our home offices back into the offices we used to do? But if this is going to be slow, I'm interested to find out your point of view. If you think office tech will move into the home environment, are we going to start to see some of these core pieces of technology in our day-to-day living at home? And if so, kind of how would that work, and would it work from the offices to your home?
Yeah, I think so. Really good question. We have tons of tech in our home already. That we have more in our home than we do our office, which is quite scary. But the office is tending to get more and more that's relevant these days. And with the world of the internet and having IP addresses and everything else, from sensors all the way through to cloud-based systems, softwares, there is no reason why you can't have a hybrid solution. They've been around for many, many years. It's just that the pandemic has positioned it in such a way that people now that want to spend their money in different areas may want to have a few hub satellite office with smaller spaces and homed in spaces. that then they can adopt that tech on a hybrid solution for home and office. So we're all doing pretty well, being at our homes or just getting back into the offices. A prime example, if you have sensors for occupancy that you can use in an office, all you need is a gateway and put a sensor under the desk to show that you're at your home desk if people are that worried. There are just simple quick wins of sensors that cost pounds rather than hundreds or thousands, that you can just have another sensor. So no matter where you are, you can see what you're doing, collaboration, speak on all of the usual Teams, Zoom, chats, everything else, as well as community apps. So you can still keep the engagement amongst you and your peers and colleagues. And I think the key thing to remember about it all is, no matter where you are in the world these days, sometimes it's right for some, but sometimes it's not for others. And it's all about having the choice. So if you want to attract the best talent or the top talent to your business in the future, give them choice. If you don't give them choice, you've literally pushed them down where you want them to be. Mm-hmm. With the evolving landscape of technology, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned a lot of choice, and I think from our side, Simon, kind of sitting on the prop tech side of real estate, there is a huge amount of choice. You look at platforms, Unisu, there's kind of 8,000 prop tech companies global. And I think this perhaps poses one of the big challenges of technology is actually identifying what's right. Nicky, I'd be really keen to understand from your view, kind of your role at Savills, looking at kind of trends and disruption. What have you seen perhaps other sectors, how have they chosen the right technology? Have they kind of looked at research? Have they predicted? Are they kind of talking to their tenants? What can they do to find the right technology, and what should they be doing to find the right technology?
So I suppose, the question firstly is technology the solution? I think, we jump always to assuming that technology is always the solution. But I think firstly, the question goes, is that the right approach? And then really, effectively technology, in my view, is always about trying to figure out classically, what is the problem you're trying to solve and what is the right technology fit. So being really focused on what are you trying to achieve. Is technology the right way to solve the problem? And what's then the right technology? What's the right technology fit? That kind of, for me, is the right way to come at much of this conversation. I think it was great hearing Michael just talking. It feels to me in this space around what we've experienced over the last few months is largely an acceleration into a future that was coming anyway. We already knew that work could happen in multiple different locations, that work could happen at home, it can happen in third spaces, it can happen in transit. And so really the technology fit has to be something that is incredibly flexible. And again, coming back to what Michael said, very much focused on personal individual need, which will look different for different organizations, it will look different for different teams within organizations, and it will look different for individuals. So I think trying to identify what the problem is, whether technology is the right solution, and then creating highly personalized solutions, for me, feels to be the way, the big picture way to come into this.
Yeah, I think we already knew we could work from home, and you're right, that kind of this huge accelerant with COVID-19 has made us implement technology. And Brent, from your side, I guess perhaps you and I are going to share some similarity, kind of being relatively new into the market. Keen to get your take on how you as a business have incorporated technology, but actually also interested to find out kind of the technology you as an internal business have implemented, and kind of the external tech for your clients and your occupiers kind of during this pretty strange period. So how have you guys found implementing technology for Navana Property Group?
Sure, thanks guys. So I think the first thing for me to say on this strand of conversation would be that we don't tend to see things at Navana as internal tech and external tech, okay? And that's because quite often in the world of integration, your back of house systems will feed your customer facing or your client facing systems. And the facts are that if your back of house or internal system doesn't quite do what you want it to do, then the experience you can then deliver through tech externally outside of the four walls of your business can become very rapidly diminished. So we prefer to see this as one holistic living and breathing technology ecosystem rather than a siloed internal and external approach. I think the key thing to understand about Navana Property Group within this conversation is the fact that as of 2 years ago, we were a blank canvas, right? A completely blank canvas. And so we don't have the legacy issues which some other organizations who do what we do in the market have to face day in, day out. And so for all intents and purposes, we're quite lucky in that regard, and it comes with the territory of starting a new business, doesn't it? So we tend to look at prop tech as an underpinning, the underpinning lifeblood of the business rather than something which is a bolt-on. And because we've been able to build our technology stack from scratch, we've been able to take a proactive rather than reactive approach to how we build out our technology and systems. And the way we've done that is in a consultative fashion, okay? So we spent a lot of time, really important stage of a process for us. We spent a lot of time talking out there in the wild to our clients, customers and residents, okay? And I think this touches on something which Nicky quite rightly mentioned earlier, which is you need to be solving a genuine pain point. So therefore it stands to reason that locating those pain points, both the qualitative data, i.e. the conversations you're having with clients and customers, and the quantitative data is so important, because if you don't have the right insight to develop your tech stack upon, then ultimately you're not going to be in a very good place in a year, 2 year, 5 years time down the track. So from the outset, we worked very closely, in particular with clients when it came to understanding what their pain points were. One thing we heard time and time again from a cross section of clients, whether they be residential clients, whether they be BTR clients, whether they be commercial clients, this was a real unifying piece, was clients were having a real problem understanding the true financial performance of their assets, and had issues with financial transparency, particularly when it comes to how they're managing agents or how their operators are managing the purse strings. What are their arrears positions? What does their service charge budget look like? So on and so forth. After scouring the market, we very quickly came to the conclusion internally that actually there wasn't a composite integrated solution out there in the market which did all the things that actually we wanted it to do to offer best value to our clients. So we focused on that, and we invested in our own external client-facing app, which is called NavTech. You can really think of this as a one-stop shop, almost a banking app for mixed use and BTR property and asset management, which gives our clients in real time a detailed, granular view into their financial performance. If indeed they wake up in a cold sweat at 2 a.m. in the morning and think, what's my arrears position at 128 Shore Road? They can have a quick look at the app, and the app will give them that information. But that only works because we've configured our back of house system to deliver that information in real time to the external platform, which brings me full circle back to the point I led out on, which was we don't really think about internal and external tech. It's just tech, and it needs to talk, and it needs to work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting to say there's no differentiator between kind of back of house and tenant systems. I think that, have you found that's led from kind of consumers needing that transparency? And how did you know they need that information? You said you did a lot of research at the start.
We spoke to people, Guy. The hard yards, we did a lot of heavy lifting. We spoke to a cross section of clients, clients that were known to us, clients that weren't known to us. And we spent some time talking to residents, commercial occupiers, businesses as well. And so from that work, we're able to build a relatively robust picture of what the actual requirements were, what the pain points were, and how, as a new business, as a new entrant, we could deliver the maximum optimal level of value into our field of play, if you like.
Good. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting about delivery. I think, Nicky, this is something you and I have discussed previously. Kind of, you got two polar opposites of technology, which moves really quite fast, and then real estate, which does not move pretty fast. how have you seen kind of from working in different sectors, how have you seen real estate being able to kind of catch up with our demands, with kind of the consumer requirements and the ability to deliver? Have you seen other markets being able to do this, and kind of can that translate to build to rent can act quick enough to our consumer demands?
Yeah, I think we have talked about this, Guy. I think this is incredibly interesting. The challenge often within the real estate market is exactly this: real estate moves at a relatively slow pace. How do you relate that to fast changing consumer preferences and demands? And I think that is, I think that's incredibly challenging. Working on, I work regularly on large mixed use development schemes where you've got a 10, 15 year timeline. How do you possibly plan for what the human experience of that space is going to need to be over 10, 15 years? And what will technology look like over that period of time? And I think it is challenging. That's without events like the last recent few months, which throw up all sorts of different challenges. I think it's often quite interesting to look within the real estate world, to look at sectors, particularly the retail sector. I think it's often quite interesting to look at, because when you look at retail and you see what's happened in the retail sector, and you see those changing consumer behaviours, and you see that relationship between online retail and physical retail, I think that gives us some good sense and indication of where consumers perhaps are going, how consumers engage with technology. And also that kind of, for me, a lot of my work is focused around this relationship between physical and digital. How do you create this incredible experience, which is both an online and an offline experience, which I think for real estate generally, whether we're talking about living, working, learning, play, whatever we're talking about, much of it is this relationship between the physical and the digital, the online, the offline, and importantly, how you bring that experience together for a consumer so they have a completely seamless experience, whether it's digital or physical. I think that's the challenge. It's a fast-moving consumer market, but that really is the opportunity to land that, to get that right. I think can be incredibly powerful.
Great. And Louisa, I'd love to get your opinion, because it was Nicky mentioned the kind of that correlation between the digital and physical space. Now, real estate historically has been quite a traditional industry. It is bricks and mortar. What are you seeing in terms of your clients' requirements for skill sets sat within technology? So bracing that digital to physical space. Are you finding that's more important, or are they still looking at the traditional kind of skill sets?
I think it entirely sort of depends on the client. If it's a real estate investment fund, or say like Savills looking at a digital transformation role, or if it's like, I don't know, say a prop tech business who needs to hire someone to sort of sell their product. I think is knowledge and experience in prop tech necessary? No, I don't think it is. I mean, it's still such an early stage for, I guess if you're discounting Yardi and MRI, which have been around for since 1980s or something like that, it's still relatively new. So for someone to have experience in prop tech specifically, there's 3 or 4 years was sort of going on. So I think finding someone who has that real estate experience is necessary for certain roles. But then again, what I'm sort of doing the whole time is attracting people to this industry from other sort of tech sectors. So when Nicky might be hiring someone for, her team, they could be coming from, you mentioned retail, hospitality, another sort of finance tech sector. So it really sort of depends what the company's sort of looking for in the stage in their growth. I think over time, ultimately this will change as we go further into this, I guess, development and growth of the sector. But for now, I think right now we're attracting talent from all areas, and we'll probably be doing the same thing for the next few years.
Great. Yeah, I see a lot of people kind of making the headlines of moving from sectors. You look at the kind of some of the big corporate world, they take on a lot of tech talent, and I can see more people moving from prop tech into real estate, and then vice versa, kind of we look to gain experience from traditional real estate experts to further enhance our solution to grow. But I'd like to focus a little bit on kind of the talent side in a little bit, but right now kind of wanted to focus on some of the tools needed. Now, tools can mean technology, they can mean people, they can mean spaces. And Brent, I know you're really keen and got a kind of a good passion of what spaces are, because sitting at home right now, I'd be kind of one of 4 or 5 different kind of classes. I could be working, I could be shopping, I could be managing, I could be a teacher trying to teach my kids. Wanted to understand from yourself what these sorts of spaces need to do to enable this flexible living, working sort of space. Is there going to be a differential? Are we going to determine kind of your co-living, co-working space, or are they going to all be the same in years to come?
So I think no one has a crystal ball, guys. So with regard to how the next few years are going to play out, you know, all bets are off at the moment, given the changes which we know are currently in existence. And I think, by the way, that all COVID has served to do, in the majority of cases, actually, is accelerate underlying trends which are in existence anyway, with regard to the way people are living their lives. You know, online shopping is going to continue to grow. The commercial workspace world is pivoting. These are all things which were happening before. But just to come back to the question, I think it's a really important point, and it's one we talk about a lot. I think particularly in the BTR arena, what we're saying now is, and what I spend a lot of my time talking to our clients about is, you know, if you're building to rent, you're probably also building to shop, and you're building to work. So how do you account for that in the design of your developments? How do you account for that in where the developments are located, feasibility? How do you account for that in the amenity mix, the infrastructure? How do you account for that actually in how your buildings and assets are operated and managed? So I think there's an awful lot to think about there. And I think for us, at the sharp end, if you like, as yes, as a consultant, but also a manager and operator, the key thing for us to get right here is putting together the right team, actually, to manage residents and to manage clients on the ground. And so when it comes to property managers, we believe that the role of a property manager is probably too generic in August 2020. We think the property manager role is too jack of all trades. It's probably a bit too generalist. So as a property managing agent, and I appreciate this might sound a little strange, as a managing agent, we don't employ anyone with the title property manager. That's not to say that we don't think there are loads and loads of really talented people operating in property manager roles out there. Indeed, there are, we all know them. But we think the role isn't quite right and probably not fit for purpose, given the way people's lifestyles are changing, and given the way then that these spaces are becoming more fluid, and where people live is also where people are now shopping and where people are working. So yeah, an awful lot to think about there for everyone from end to end within the property sector, actually.
Nicky, keen to get your views following kind of Brent's statement of kind of property management is too generalist. Do you think that's true? Kind of, have we got the right mix and diversity and skill set and knowledge to be in say a property manager in today's world?
I don't think you can ever have too much diversity, and I don't know, real estate traditionally, I'm going to say this, hasn't been known for its diversity, I guess. I think that is changing. I hope it will continue to change. I want it to change faster. I think there are all sorts of very good reasons why we would benefit from more diversity generally. And I think diversity at every level. In terms of people's career backgrounds, I think we touched on earlier this notion of people from outside real estate coming into the industry and being incredibly valuable in bringing different perspective. I think the industry would benefit tremendously from broader perspective from other industries, other individuals, people with different backgrounds. I think that's incredibly powerful. And I'm really, personally, and I think organisationally, we at Savills keen to see those kind of changes. I know that certainly with, we have a huge property management division, and I would be cautious at speaking on its behalf, but I would definitely say that the people within it, we have this enormous range of skill sets within it, to Brent's point, and a huge recognition of the need for enormous individual skill sets. It's an enormous role. I think being a property manager is a huge and challenging and important role. And certainly within Savills, my experience of working with those teams is they are extraordinary, and they are people who have enormous experience and very defined experience. So we have sustainability experts, we have placemaking experts, the list of expertise goes on. And I think to Brent's point, it is all about, it's a challenging role being a property manager, and you need a lot of specific expertise. And it's also a role that is evolving very quickly, I think, because client expectations, quite rightly, are evolving and increasing. And so organisations like Savills need to respond to that.
Can I jump in on Nicky and Brent's very good points there, if I may?
Please do.
I deal with property management day in, day out. So I know these people, especially at the moment with rent collections and you name it, are at max capacity, especially when regional FMs have got 10 buildings and they're here, there and everywhere. And then the head of FMs, you don't even know they exist. They're just in the background crazy, which I think tech as an enabler and automating tasks that don't need to bog people down, us everyday people on the front line, as well as the consumer being all of a sudden their customers, the most important ones in the supply chain, if you like, or the food chain. We've actually taken this different way of thinking that it's now going, hang on a second, what matters to those people? How do we actually get them? Morrison took X amount of managers, thousands from the back office and put them customer facing. That was pre-COVID, but in the world of thinking and critical thinking, it's going, hang on a second, we've got more automation, we've got these tools that do all of this, let the individuals flourish. When we employed them, we saw something that was beautiful in them, that was a really good skill set, that they were fantastic with people, for example, and now they're just bogged down with more process, more tasks and everything else, and let alone then say, hey, let's put some more tech solutions and systems and give them even more stuff to deal with and learn. And I just think that's probably the most crazy way of doing things. And if we're not careful, we're going to take a few steps backwards. I quite like the whole customer experience piece. For me, is it shouldn't be a USP ever, customer experience. It should be a given, but allow people to do that piece then. And I think tech should be seen in businesses and in real estates and for every side of the fence, from landlords to tenants to building to rent, from people coming from Hong Kong and investing in London because of unrest and all the multifaceted things going on, is let people in the UK, in our industries, be the difference. I think it's paramount.
I think, Louisa, from your point, say from Vicky saying, look, we need this diversity, we need to pull people in from different sectors and backgrounds, and Brent saying kind of, there isn't anybody called a property manager. Is this making your life more difficult? Kind of the additional, I am looking for, boom, job title. Now the likes of Brent or Nicky and Michael saying, actually, I'm not looking for a title, I'm looking for this skill set, the knowledge. Has this made your life more difficult? Has it made it easier? Have you been able to look into different sectors and say, okay, we've got these people with this type of experience and background, and actually, Brent, they could be great for Navana or Savills, like they could work perfectly for you. Is this played into your hands, or has it now just made your life more difficult?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if you asked me this question about 3 or 4, if we'd look at specifically focused on build to rent, or we could look at other property management industries, if you asked me this question 3 years ago, I'd say yes, it was a lot more difficult than it is now. Like 3 years ago, our LMRE living team were permanently, I guess, educating people about build to rent, like what is it, looking at it from other countries, what are the perks of it, what are the sort of draw-in factors. But candidates from agency, student accommodation, hospitality, they hadn't even heard of it. But now the sort of build to rent space, I guess it's a lot more sort of competitive. The industries like hospitality, retail, they've taken a massive hit over the past few years. And now more of those candidates who have everyone's mentioned customer service, and they have exceptional customer service and different sort of skill sets are now moving into this industry, and they have a lot they can bring to the table. And as a result of, I guess just more people from other industries being in the market, our clients now actually can find those unicorns who can sort of, whether it's, can sort of do the property management, can sort of oversee health and safety, can do the marketing, is, all of a sudden, organizing, whether it's, I don't know, dog yoga or something for the community, and, really providing that 5-star service. But that's only happened, I think, in the past, sort of 5-6 months, where it's now a client-led market and it's now a candidate-led market for these sort of roles. So it's been interesting seeing that sort of shift, but there's been a huge amount of upskilling, but just generally a larger flux of candidates who can do these sort of 360 roles. And it's great to see, and I think we're going to see a continued movement of people into this sort of sector. And then clients, you're going to get better caliber candidates who have a larger skill set, and probably you're not going to have to pay through the roof for it. Whereas before, lots of my clients, from whether it's even Granger, who everyone sort of knew about, they still had to pay a lot of money for, say, whether it's a community manager or a classic property manager. But it's changed now, especially since, I guess, post-COVID.
Yeah. I think, Louisa, that leads us on nicely to kind of, so we'll look at the attraction and the talent side, but looking at this kind of the tools and what tools is, a lot of the time we look at brands and how they can be associated to companies or individuals. And to Nicky's point, when we were speaking about the technology, kind of the so what, kind of what can it do? Is technology the right thing to be looking at, or do we need to focus on the kind of the tools, the physical aspects? But from kind of attracting the right talent to these organizations, and also for as consumers looking at the build to rent market, do we as consumers, Nicky, I'll pose this to you, do we know what build to rent is, and do we know kind of what the differentiators are, the kind of the why would we choose that company? And secondly, kind of, do you feel they're able to build up that brand recognition? So we were, okay, I'm going to choose this building, this space, because of its brand. Do you think achievable?
Well, I guess the property industry has come a very long way, in terms of my time in industry, in terms of this understanding of the importance of creating product and brand association. I personally, I feel there is a way to go, potentially. There is opportunity, I guess, in terms of how you might create better brand recognition. Again, I come back to this notion of, I am very much in favor of the idea of people from outside the industry coming in to provide different perspective about how you create brand, how you do that in an interesting kind of way. But I think, the industry's made a huge amount of progress, I think, in this space over the last period. But I would certainly say that there would be opportunity in terms of how you might create a position, brand, a sense of uniqueness. There is clearly there's work to be done there, and opportunity as to how you do that.
Great, and I think Brent, going back to yourself in terms of that space, and can it be recognizable? If you're taking on these individuals, say, not pigeonholed into the property management title, the skill sets you're bringing on as an organization, do you feel they can help you build that brand to be recognizable for people to kind of choose your service because they know they're going to get that level of experience, and are going to be achieving this? I know you've brought on some quite interesting talent on business, which perhaps have not been kind of pigeonholed residential BTR kind of expertise, but they've come from other sectors. Is that to build a brand and to get that diversity into the business?
Yeah, but precisely that, guy. I mean, you can take myself as an exemplar of that, really. So if you go back long enough, 6 or 7 years, I was developing brands and new product development strategies for the likes of Adidas, Asda, Britvic, Pepsi. So I'm not a native, if you want to use that term, of a property world at all. Although I've been operating within it for a long enough time now, hopefully, to know what the role of brand perhaps should be in the property world. And I think on that, I always hear a lot of interesting opinions, and there's always a debate raging around the validity of brand as an asset actually within property and specifically within the BTR arena, and that's great. And that only means that it's gaining traction, and the idea and the principle of brand is finding its way up the agendas of organisations and senior people and decision makers. So that's a really positive thing, first of all, in my view. What I would say though, and again, a broad brush statement, would be that there's nowhere near the amount of nuance in and around the brand debate when it comes to BTR specifically. So what I mean by that is, of course, a brand in the BTR sector will do a completely different set of things, will be developed for a completely different purpose to a brand for a consumer product, whether that's a sports trainer or whether that's a can of beans on a supermarket shelf. And so we need to become more comfortable with this idea of what value does brand actually deliver in the BTR sector. And in order to realise that, and in order to understand that, you have to really get under the bonnet and you have to think about it, and it's intellectual and it's not easy. And so what I would say on that is, I think, the role of brand in BTR serves two primary functions, and this is slightly binary, but just to simplify it, I think. First of all, in an ever-crowded BTR marketplace, your brand helps you disrupt and helps you to catch attention. So in other words, it helps you to differentiate yourself, your asset, your amenity mix, your service and your experience from what else is out there in the market. So that's a unifying, universal principle of brand building actually in any sector. But where brand building in BTR does differ to other sectors is that when it comes to value and identifying value, it has to be about that cross-section of brand and experience. When we talk about brand in BTR, really, the operators that get brand in BTR also understand experience, and they understand how brand leads experience, and they understand how brand guides the service that residents deliver, or that your team as a property manager deliver to residents. It's about how brand works in the real world, how it's tangibly felt and experienced by residents, which I think is really, really important. So yeah, I absolutely believe in the idea of brand as a driver of asset value in BTR, but I think we need to work harder as a collective to frame what that value actually is and what the purpose of brands is and should be in the future. Great,
thanks. Yeah, I think, Brent, to your point, kind of brands will help us, I guess, make that choice and actually become a phrase within kind of the software industry of being more sticky. How can we help our clients and make sure that they work with us and be really part of a partner? But I think a key part of this is choice. And right now, as kind of Nicky mentioned earlier, the kind of the consumer-led model, as consumers we're demanding and changing our requirements and expecting real estate to catch up. Michael, this is probably sitting more on your world of kind of wearing the consultancy hat. And I know Brent earlier said you can't kind of predict the future, but right now the reality is we are all predominantly at home. If we're going to the office, it is not kind of full time. And if we're looking at, we're going to focus on kind of this BTR sector right now. And again, so I don't want to be a futurologist, but the facts are there's a lot of investors kind of pursuing the family housing model, the kind of the US family housing model. But in the UK, it's been very slow. The build to rent market is focused on high rise, highly condensed builds within city landscapes. Do you think right now it's going to be changing? Do you think that the build to rent operators are going to focus more on perhaps rural locations giving us the ability. I know I've listened to some of your talks before on kind of the potential of satellite offices, and kind of going full circle with kind of Brent's and Nicky's and Louisa's feedback of building a brand. Do you think we'll start searching, saying, okay, well, I know this office brand, and now they have satellite offices or areas which could be incorporated into my home, into my physical home. Would you work there over the office? Do you think it's going to be a blended mix? So yeah, sorry to put you on the spot about the future, but
not at all.
What do you think that space could look like?
Well, there was talk about it a few years ago of making these working estates, if you like, in terms of industrial areas that they would first trial out. We're putting some houses, a lot like the military, where everybody lives on site, does their job, it's on their doorstep, it's more efficient. They've been doing it in various guises for a long time. It's just whether or not investment, I think, is the key thing to be crucial about. There's various polls and things that have been done to say that even post-COVID, that 85% of investors are still happy to invest in cities, London being specifically one of those major ones. Now, if you're talking about more rural locations, investors are going to have a lot more data requirements, a lot more, if we do this, what on earth's going to happen? So I think the crystal ball is one thing, to steal Brent's phrase. There is potential for it. I don't think it's not look at it. I think there's a lot of landlords that would be very excited about building spaces or utilising spaces that exist in one way and changing the capability of that. I think that when you look into major cities, it's a given, but if you start going out and closer to people's homes, obviously there's a few million that live around London, but if you go closer to people's homes, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And just to resonate, Nicky, is why are you doing this? Why are you looking at this in the first place? It's coming back to it going, is it just because of the commute and people being, more efficient, or is it that they actually need the mental transition? So some people, even if you built it there, would still need to go to somewhere to have that change of mindset because you haven't got cats and kids and Amazon around you. Or you're still going to have people standing at the end of your desk waiting to ask you a question. I mean, all the usual things that actually really matter. Is it going to be different anywhere? So are we looking at something and trying to create something that we think, oh, blimey, there wasn't a problem before this COVID pandemic. Is there now? Is there going to be a big change and shift? So what the future holds, I'm not sure. I'd like personally to see a hybrid and to give people the options to say, I haven't got a two-hour commute today. But still in various job functions and roles, you still have to meet and see people anyway. So you've still got the travel, whether it be to the office to go and sit at a desk, or actually like me, you never very long, apart from COVID, sit at a desk. We're still moving anyway. So you may have the finance department that do need that. So I think it was Nicky that was saying, again, look at the different teams within that structure that are needing that. And the tech can enable all of that and create these communities and still have the communication and collaboration and everything else. I think you have to look at what you're trying to achieve. The key fundamental is don't jump into stuff, because tech's taken this huge boost. It's also increased the risk for my part, and it's actually made my life a lot more difficult to hold people's hands a hell of a lot more over a quicker transition period, to not shoehorn in a solution, but the multiple pitfalls that come with that type of thing. I think what that's also done is made companies really focus on what is truly business critical. So when they look at build to rent, they look at why they're creating that spaces, what type of profiling they've got in that building. They've started thinking about that more. So when you're moving into large areas where you've profiled a lot of younger people that are a certain age that want to live in a smaller community with young families, there's a multitude of things that you've got to consider of why you're going to do that. So sorry to waffle on about that, but we could go on and on and on, and just trying to hone it down again, it's a very broad brush. And the key thing is start creating those satellite hubs and those hub spaces and those hybrid solutions, because they are the drop-in places that we're all around the UK and the world and global now anyway. So one place of work of it being somewhere means that you can't attract the top talent because they live further away where that office is nearer. Lots of food for thought around that.
Nicky, then, would you agree the kind of, I know with Brent's thoughts and Michael saying it's going to be a bit of a blended space. We've seen other sectors, primarily retail, have blend and evolve. They couldn't physically just have their shops. The horror stories of kind of your Blockbusters and Toys R Us. I think there's obviously going to be some casualties within real estate, but how do you think we can learn or evolve to have these blended spaces? And you rightly put it, kind of the digital to the physical space. Are we going to be able to achieve this? Is there going to be a difference from working from home and going back into the office? Is it really just completely blended and you're not going to really notice that difference, because offices spent so long making it like a home, but our homes just like our offices? Is it going to be achievable to do this blended space?
You know what? I don't think anyone could say that they absolutely have the answer to pretty much anything right now. The world is changing like every day. So certainly at Savills, we've tried to understand what sentiment is around this. We've done a huge piece of work over the last period of months, which I've been part of a broad team working around this, trying to understand sentiment around this future living working piece, which of course has just been an enormous amount of conversation around and comment. So we conducted a survey, substantial survey, to try and understand what people were saying. Our plan is to do that again in the autumn. I think we're expecting that there will be changes in sentiment, inevitably. That's available. We will make it available to people if they are interested in that. There's a huge amount of detail in there about how people were reflecting on their experience of working from home. And I guess, to Michael's point, a number of things come out of that for me. I think it goes back to, where we started this conversation, this whole notion of it's different for individuals, different for organizations, different for teams. We will expect to see a lot more choice, a lot more autonomy, I think, going forward, so that individuals have that ability to make choices about where they're going to do their work. I think the transit thing is key. We've definitely seen over the last period the role that transit plays. And we as part of that piece of work, we've thought a lot about this relationship of not just where you live, where you work, but how you move between these spaces, I think is incredibly important. And to some degree, I guess there's an expectation of, for some people, this sort of notion of a hybrid. So you will spend some of your time working at home. Some tasks, some functions can be delivered super well at home. Other things you definitely will want to go to a physical space. You'll want to meet colleagues. Certainly when you are trying to get to know a role, when you're new to work, when you're a younger person who's trying to learn how to do work, it's incredibly important to be part of your organization. And organizations will definitely want people to come and be physically present. It's incredibly important at an organizational level that people feel connected in and part of the organization, part of the team. So this kind of hybrid world, I think, where you spend some of your time working at home, some of your time working in a space. This notion, we've talked a lot about hub and spoke, this notion of city centre locations, but also some satellite locations. We're thinking that could be part of the future. So it's an exciting, it's a time of huge change. I don't think anyone can be absolutely certain about how this is going to land, but certainly this sort of sense that our homes playing a sort of different role, and to where we started this conversation, how do you make a home an effective workspace? Not all of us have the luxury of having an office. How do you create an effective space to work at home? And that can be really challenging. Many people have experienced that. So I think lots of questions, but for me, space has always been pretty blended. You can sit in a room and you can be shopping, you can be playing games, you can be working, you can be learning. Real estate puts a categorization around space, in terms of assets. People don't use space in that way. we're not conscious of that as a user of space. And I think that's definitely what we're going to think more about.
Great. And I need to say we've got a few minutes left before I kindly hand back over to Dave. Louisa, so we've talked a lot about blended spaces, and I awkwardly asked Michael to kind of predict some of the future, but I think perhaps these kind of satellite offices or spaces where we don't physically need to travel those 2 hours to get to the office is going to start to change. How have you seen talent pools? Because there's a reason why London is kind of so successful. It does attract talent. Kind of people will move to the city to get those good jobs, to be in the right places. How are you finding that in terms of location of talent, meaning that we don't necessarily need to be in the major cities to perform these roles? Are you now seeing from your clients saying actually they don't mind locations where a property manager may need to permanently be on site, but could they do their role remotely with the ability to just be on site a few hours or a day? So do you see location being a differentiator now, and do your clients still need people in the cities?
Yeah, I think, again, it sort of entirely depends on the role of what they're sort of performing. Someone in leasing or community manager will always need to be on site, because that's why tenants, or say if a developer wants to keep their, I guess, tenant level up, they need to provide the best customer service there. So that will require someone to be on site 24/7. I think if you look at the prop tech side, no, you can do lots of things sort of remotely. But I think going back to sort of what Nicky said, workplace culture and environment is still so important for attracting to the highest caliber of candidate, you know, no matter sort of what sort of industry you're in, you know, what your sort of age is, you still thrive off that sort of social sort of interaction. And that's also how people innovate and upskill when you are in the office environment. Then I also think if we're looking specifically at build to rent again, you know, attracting the right candidates to their site, they'll sort of do it by people sort of, I guess, candidates buying into the community sort of feel, like way of life. They hold their interviews on like their Deptford Croydon site, so candidates can really understand, you know, what is life like on site. Grange do a similar thing where they put their new employees on different sort of sites, so they can really sort of get a feel for the bigger picture of what the company sort of offers, not only for, I guess, for the people who are living on that site, but also what it's like to really work there. And I think if you sort of demonstrate to whoever's joining your company the sort of level of, I guess, service you need to provide, and if it's brilliant and they enjoy working there, you're going to get the best people. But then, you know, there's other instances where who's done this? Like Native partner with a Combrand, and they're sort of, you know, all their furniture on sort of site. It makes people want to go work there. I mean, it's like absolutely beautiful. It's like, you know, the Four Seasons, you know, everyone is attracted to the bigger picture of a working environment. Everyone loves the flexibility of working at home. Like, it's brilliant. You get to see your family and sort of friends more, you know, that you can focus on things. But I think it really depends on what sort of role you're doing. I think if we're looking at sort of the tech side, or say going back into sort of marketing, there's great ways of making sure you're still attracting tenants, but also candidates. And that's through great branding like TP, all those tube adverts or train adverts they have everywhere about what their business is doing. It's a great way of sort of, I guess, keeping the tenants and candidates levels up, but it's so competitive. And that's where I really think the traditional real estate property management firms or the old estates need to be competitive, really look at sort of branding, how they're pitching their brand to the market as well, because that will ultimately really affect who's going to go work there. And also if the tenant's going to choose their site over, or their property management service over another, because everyone wants that like 5-star service and I guess environment.
Great, thank you, Louisa. I'm just conscious how fast that hour has flown by. We can skip some of the really tricky questions, and I just want to hand back over to Dave, but just to say thank you to the panelists. Been really insightful for myself. Hopefully it's helped some individuals to understand the tech tools and talent needed. But yeah, thank you ever so much. Hopefully everybody stays safe, and I'll hand over to Dave.
Guy and panel, thank you so much. I mean, one of the things I've been struck with over the last few weeks about webinars is the quality has got so good, and this is very much one of the best that I've sat in on or been responsible for. We touched on so many important points. What's the value proposition for BTR? How do you define it? Something that's crucial to UKA's purpose in life. Esports and BTR, Nicky, I mean, we could spend all day talking about that. Repurposing the high street, the Sigma model of out-of-town developments, really, really big sets of questions. And then I think for me, absolute crucial piece of build to rent, the design of customer experience versus the design of the building. How do you reconcile our industry, which knows how to build big buildings, but doesn't really understand the idea of customer experience? And again, Nicky and Brent, I think the things you said are absolutely crucial. And Michael, I could have spent hours talking about tech adoption, and versus the tech stack versus the use of tech, and whether tech is really going to be a determinant of winners and losers in real estate going forward. But we haven't got time for that. So I just like to say thank you for everybody who's attended. Thank you for everybody on the panel. A reminder, the recording of this will be available in a couple of days on our website. And look, join us again for in the future webinars. I think we're taking a break for a week or so, but there'll be another program launching in probably a fortnight's time, and there's lots of things that I've seen already on the list. So thank you again, have a good day, and as Rudy says, stay safe, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you, goodbye.